My family said I'd die broke and alone because I chose to help people instead of chasing money. Then I bought the hospital where they ended up as patients, and they had no idea it was me. I've always been the black sheep of my family. Not because I did anything wrong, not because I was reckless or irresponsible, but because I chose a different path. While my cousins were becoming lawyers and doctors and corporate executives, I was working at a homeless shelter making barely enough to pay rent. My aunt would look at me during family dinners like I was some kind of failure. My uncle would make jokes about how I'd never own a house or retire. And my own parents, they were embarrassed to tell their friends what I did for a living. But I didn't care. I loved my work. I loved helping people who had nothing. I just didn't know that one day my choice would come back around in the most unexpected way possible. It all started when I was 24. I had just finished my degree in social work, and instead of taking some high-paying job at a consulting firm like everyone expected, I took a position at a small nonprofit that helped homeless families find housing. The pay was terrible. I'm talking $28,000 a year in a city where rent for a tiny studio was $1,500 a month. I had 2 roommates. I took the bus everywhere, and I ate rice and beans most nights because that's all I could afford. But I was happy. I was actually making a difference. I was helping families get off the streets. I was connecting people with resources they didn't know existed. Every day felt meaningful. My family didn't see it that way. I remember this one Thanksgiving dinner when I was 25. My cousin Brad had just made partner at his law firm. My cousin Jennifer had just bought her second rental property. And then there was me. Still taking the bus, still living with roommates, still working at the nonprofit. My Aunt Linda asked me how work was going, but not in a nice way. In that condescending way, where she already knew she wouldn't like the answer. I told her it was going great. We just helped this single mom and her 3 kids get into permanent housing after 2 years of being homeless. She smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. She said that was nice, but didn't I want more for myself? Didn't I want a real career? Didn't I want to be able to afford things? I told her I had everything I needed. My Uncle George laughed. Actually laughed. He said I was young and idealistic, and that eventually I'd realize the world doesn't reward people who give everything away. He said I'd wake up one day at 50 years old with nothing to show for my life. No savings, no property, no retirement. Just a bunch of thank you cards from people who'd forget about me the second they didn't need me anymore. My dad didn't defend me. He just sat there, quiet, looking down at his plate. My mom changed the subject, but the damage was done because after that dinner, everything changed. My family started treating me differently. They stopped inviting me to things. They stopped asking about my life. And when my grandmother passed away a year later and left inheritance money to all the grandkids, I was the only one who didn't get anything. My Aunt Linda called me to explain. She said my grandmother wanted her money to go to family members who were building stable futures. She said it wasn't personal, but my lifestyle was too uncertain. The money would be wasted on me. I didn't fight it. I didn't argue. I just accepted it because at that point I knew the truth. My family didn't respect me. They didn't value what I did, and they'd already decided I was going to fail. But here's what they didn't know. I wasn't just working at that nonprofit. I was learning. I was watching how the organization operated, how funding worked, how to write grants, how to build partnerships with local businesses and government agencies. And I was good at it, really good. When I was 27, the director of the nonprofit retired. She asked me if I wanted to take over. I said yes. At first, it was terrifying. I'd never run an organization before. I'd never managed a budget or led a team, but I figured it out. I worked 16-hour days. I wrote grant proposals until my eyes burned. I met with every city council member, every local business owner, every church leader who would give me 10 minutes of their time. And slowly, things started to change. We got our first big grant from the state, $50,000 to expand our services. Then a local real estate developer donated a building we could use as a transitional housing facility. Then a tech company gave us $100,000 to start a job training program. Within 2 years, we'd tripled in size. We were helping over 200 families a year. We'd built partnerships with hospitals, schools, and employers. We weren't just giving people a place to sleep anymore. We were giving them a path forward. I still wasn't making much money. I gave myself a small raise, but most of the funding went back into programs. I was making $45,000 a year, which sounds like a lot more than $28,000. But in reality, I was still living pretty lean. Still had roommates, still took the bus, still ate cheap meals most of the time. But the organization was growing, and I was proud of what we were building. My family didn't know any of this. I'd stopped going to family events. I'd stopped calling. They'd made it clear I wasn't really part of their world anymore, so I just focused on my work. Then, when I was 32, something happened that changed everything. The hospital in our city, the main hospital that served the downtown area where most of our clients lived, went bankrupt. It had been struggling for years. Mismanagement, debt, bad investments. The board tried to keep it afloat, but eventually, they couldn't. They announced they were closing. This was a disaster for our community. This hospital served thousands of low-income families. It was the only place in the area that accepted patients regardless of their ability to pay. If it closed, people would have to travel across the city to get care, and a lot of them didn't have cars or money for transportation. I started getting calls from our clients, parents whose kids had chronic illnesses and needed regular checkups, elderly people who depended on the hospital's free clinic. People were panicking. I called an emergency meeting with our board of directors. I said we had to do something. One of our board members, a retired businesswoman named Carol, asked what I had in mind. I said we should buy it. Everyone stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Our organization had grown, sure, but we weren't big enough to buy a hospital. That was insane. But Carol didn't think so. She said if we could put together the right funding, if we could bring in the right partners, we might be able to pull it off. Not as a traditional hospital, but as a non-profit community health center. We could restructure the debt, bring in grant funding, partner with medical schools to get doctors who wanted to work in underserved areas. It would be risky. It would be hard, but it was possible. We spent the next 6 months working on it. I wrote more grant proposals than I'd ever written in my life. I pitched the idea to every foundation, every major donor, every government agency that would listen. I called in every favor I'd built up over the years, and somehow it worked. We got a massive grant from a national health foundation. We got funding from the city and the state. We got donations from local businesses who didn't want to see the hospital close. We even got medical schools to commit to sending residents to train there. When I was 33 years old, our nonprofit bought the hospital. We restructured it, brought in new management, and reopened it as a community health center that provided care to anyone who walked through the doors, regardless of whether they could pay. It was the proudest moment of my life. I didn't tell my family. I didn't think they'd care. I hadn't spoken to most of them in years. But about 8 months after we reopened the hospital, I got a call from my mom. She sounded stressed. She told me my dad had been having chest pains and they'd taken him to the emergency room. She said they were at the community health center downtown, the one that used to be the old hospital. I felt my stomach drop. I asked if he was okay. She said they were still running tests, but the doctors seemed good. She said she was surprised by how nice the hospital was now, how much better it seemed than before. I told her I'd come by. When I got there, I didn't tell anyone who I was. I just walked in like any other visitor. I saw my mom in the waiting room. She looked older than I remembered, tired. She hugged me, and for a second, it felt like old times. She kept talking about how lucky they were that this hospital had reopened. She said if it hadn't, they would have had to drive across the city, and with my dad's chest pains, they might not have made it in time. She said whoever saved this place was a hero. I didn't say anything. My dad ended up being okay. He'd had a minor heart attack, but they caught it early. He stayed in the hospital for 3 days, and the whole time, my family had no idea that I owned the place, that I was the one who'd saved it, that the reason my dad was getting excellent care without worrying about a massive bill was because of the work I'd spent the last decade doing. Then, a few months later, my Aunt Linda got sick. Cancer. She needed treatment, and guess where she ended up? The community health center. She didn't have great insurance. Her treatments Treatments were expensive, but our hospital had programs to help people with costs. We had partnerships with pharmaceutical companies to get medications at reduced prices. We had social workers who helped patients navigate financial assistance. My aunt got the treatment she needed without going bankrupt. She never knew it was me. Then my Uncle George needed surgery for his knee. Same hospital, same programs, same support. One by one, the family members who'd mocked me, who'd said I'd die poor and worthless, ended up needing the very thing I'd built. And every single time, I made sure they got the best care possible. I made sure their bills were covered. I made sure they never had to worry. And I never told them. It's been 5 years now. The hospital is thriving. We serve over 10,000 patients a year. We've expanded our services. We've opened satellite clinics in other underserved areas. And our nonprofit has become one of the most respected health organizations in the state. I finally make a decent salary. Not millions, but enough that I bought my own place. I don't have roommates anymore. I can afford to take a vacation once a year. I'm doing okay. My family still doesn't know. My mom mentions the hospital sometimes when we talk on the phone. She says how grateful she is that it exists. My Aunt Linda, who survived her cancer, volunteers there now. She tells me all the time how amazing the staff is, how much the hospital changed her life. I just smile and say, that's great. People ask me why I don't tell them, why I don't let them know that I'm the one who built the thing they're so grateful for. And honestly, I don't need to. I didn't do this for recognition. I didn't do it to prove them wrong, even though I guess I kind of did. I did it because it was the right thing to do, because people needed help and I was in a position to give it. The fact that it happened to save the same family members who told me I'd fail, that's just the universe having a sense of humor. My Uncle George was wrong. The world does reward people who give. Maybe not always with money or status, but with something better, with purpose, with meaning, with the knowledge that you made things better for people who had nothing. I don't regret my choices. I don't regret the years I spent barely getting by, because those years taught me what mattered, and they led me here, to a place where I can help thousands of people every single year. My family thought kindness was weakness. They thought caring about others meant you'd end up with nothing. But they were wrong. Kindness didn't make me weak. It made me powerful. Powerful enough to save the very people who doubted me. And that's worth more than any inheritance they could have left me. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this. Retry.